Hope everyone's doing well. This is the 50,000 mile review of the F-150 PowerBoost Hybrid 2021 model year, which we've had for about a year and 3/4, maybe a year and 9 months, give or take. We got it in early March of 2021, and now it's the end of 2022. So we've had it just under 2 years and just over 50,000 miles. And in a word, this is a phenomenal truck. It has held up exceptionally well over 50,000 miles. Had a couple of very, very minor maintenance issues, nothing to be concerned about, and is just a fundamentally outstanding truck in so many ways. Ford really hit it out of the park with the 14th gen redesign of the F-150, and specifically with this powertrain, the hybrid, or as they call it, the PowerBoost, which matches up a 3.5 liter 24 valve double overhead cam twin turbo EcoBoost V6, which is on the 3rd generation, I think. First came out in 2011, got updated in 2018 maybe, and now it's been updated a second time. So it's in its 3rd iteration. No issues whatsoever with the cam phasers, no issues with burning oil, no issues with head gaskets, turbos dying, any of that stuff, at least at the 50,000 mile mark. Now we've ridden it hard. We've done a lot of towing with it, a lot of highway miles at anywhere from 60 to 80 miles an hour. You know, we haven't beaten on it that hard. We haven't abused it. We haven't drag raced it and you know, taken it four-wheeling and mud bogging and that kind of thing. But we have used it, and we haven't babied it either. And it has never, ever failed to deliver and do anything we asked it to. And so I just want to go over the 6 major areas of this thing, specifically the engine, the transmission, the suspension and axles, the steering, which you could say is part of the suspension, but I want to cover it separately, the body, and the interior. And those are the major areas I want to discuss. And we'll try to keep this short. But first, again, the engine. It is an absolutely phenomenal engine. When they call it a PowerBoost, it's really an EcoBoost. And as you know, if you've got one of these, or if you've ever driven one, you get either Eco or you get Boost, and you don't get both. If you're driving it under light load, if you're not towing a trailer, if you don't have a hell of a lot of weight in the back or passengers, you're going to get good mileage. We get anywhere from 20 to 22 average over the course of a 100-mile trip, a 500-mile trip, a 2,000-mile trip. And as far as we're concerned, 20 to 22 MPGs in a full-size pickup truck that weighs about 6,000 pounds is all you could ever ask for, reasonably, at least in a gas-burning pickup truck. We've also got the diesel version of the F-150, the so-called Power Stroke 3.0, and that gets anywhere from 28 to 30 miles to the gallon on the highway. Again, when you're towing, though, in this thing, you take a huge hit in gas mileage. It drops into the, I'll just say, the mid to upper single digits, and that's with, you know, just a basic 12-foot enclosed cargo trailer, or like your 12-foot U-Haul. You're lucky to get 10 miles to the gallon when you're towing that size of a trailer with this thing, again, on the highway, because of the tremendous amount of aerodynamic drag it creates, which puts the engine under load. And when an engine that's turbocharged gets put under load, the boost starts to climb, and then it starts to burn a huge amount of fuel, partly to keep your EGTs down and preserve the life of the turbochargers. Because, you know, if you run a lean mixture, then your combustion temperatures go up and your EGTs go up, and that does not promote long life on the part of a turbocharger. So we understand why Ford has that strategy. You know, they want these things to last, and you're going to pay the price for it in terms of fuel economy. So again, towing, yeah, the engine's going to be under a lot of boost, and it's going to be burning a lot of fuel, and so you're going to get absolutely terrible miles to the gallon, or MPGs. Like I said, anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe 10 if you're lucky. The diesel, on the other hand, gets anywhere from 12 to 14, or maybe even 15 miles to the gallon when it's towing, because as we all know, diesels perform very, very, very efficiently and economically under heavy load. And so that is a weak spot, if you want to call it that, on the part of this truck. You would not want to have a PowerBoost or an EcoBoost, or really any turbocharged gas-burning engine in a pickup truck if you're going to spend your life on the road and live out of your camper, because you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay, hundreds of dollars a day, potentially thousands of dollars a week just for your fuel bill. Every time you top off on this thing, it's a 30-gallon tank. You're paying $100+ at today's exaggerated fuel prices. So just keep that in mind. And it's sad because this engine and this powertrain is perfectly suited to pulling a camper, specifically because of the Pro Power on Board system, which we'll talk about. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But again, as far as the engine's concerned, people who have heard horror stories about the 3.5 EcoBoost burning a ton of oil, or devouring turbochargers, or having the dreaded cam phaser issue, either we are very, very lucky, or Ford has finally fixed that with the 3rd gen of the 3.5 EcoBoost, because it just has not been a problem for us, at least in the first 50,000 miles. And we've driven this thing in hot weather. We've had it in the Mojave Desert and Death Valley during hot weather months. We've had it in Michigan for a couple of winters. And now we're dealing with this so-called bomb cyclone that just hit the other day. Yesterday it was down to, I think, 5 or 6 degrees. This morning it was down to 4 degrees. No issues. Absolutely no issues. And on top of that, we also don't have the issue that you have in a diesel in cold weather, where your fuel actually starts to gel up, because of course it's a gasoline burning engine. So again, nothing at all to complain about this engine. The 3rd gen, I think, by itself makes around 400 horsepower. The 3rd gen with the hybrid system, or as they call it, the PowerBoost system, makes 430 horsepower, I think 570 pounds of torque, which is almost ridiculous, which is almost preposterous in a light duty pickup. That's a phenomenal amount of power and torque, more than you're ever going to use. And it just makes everything effortless. It makes passing effortless. Somebody's blocking the passing lane, and you got to go around them and accelerate to 80, 90 miles an hour to get around them safely, and then go about your day. Not an issue. You just put your foot down, and the truck delivers. When you're towing, we've had this thing through the Appalachian Mountains a number of times on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, which is 76. We've had it on I-80, and those highways have some very, very steep uphill slopes. I'm not going to say comparable to the Ike Gauntlet out in Colorado, or like I-15 coming out of Baker, California, and Death Valley heading north towards Vegas. Not like that, but still, it's enough in our Duramax to slow us down to 40 miles an hour and make it downshift to 3rd gear when we're loaded heavy. And this truck, you don't even notice. I mean, half the time when we're towing, other than stability issues, which we'll get into shortly, it doesn't even downshift. You don't even have to lock out the upper gears. You don't feel any lag with the power. You never feel turbo lag. And you never feel the turbos really doing their thing at all. The only way you know they're even in the game is because of the boost gauge. And obviously, you'll see those things when it's in the boost. You'll see the boost gauge creeping up. You won't feel a difference, and you won't hear a difference. The power delivery is just very, very linear, very smooth, and very natural feeling. It doesn't feel artificial at all. Okay, again, I can't emphasize enough. Everybody keeps hearing horror stories about the cam phasers and the turbos in the 3.5 EcoBoost, and we just have not had any issues at all whatsoever. Oil consumption, none of it. And you might say, well, it's only 50,000 miles. Sure. It could be that when we get up to 75, get up towards 100,000, yeah, we're going to start running into things like that. But again, so far, no concerns whatsoever. All right, the transmission and really the hybrid system, which you could say is a part of it. It's a 10-speed, which Ford first introduced in 2018. It's not the same as the heavy-duty 10-speed. It's a light-duty 10-speed, which Ford, like I said, came out in 2018, and now it's standard across every version of the F-150, including the base pickup truck, which has a 3.3-liter V6. I think up until this year, up until 21, it came with a 6-speed. Now everything comes with a 10-speed. And we've got no complaints at all about the transmission. Some people say it shifts really rough. Some people have had it slam into like low gear at high speeds on the highway and destroy the engine. We haven't had anything of the sort. The only thing we'd say is every now and then it does shift a little bit harshly. But it's nothing to get that concerned about. You know, this morning it was 4 or 5 degrees out. Started the truck, warmed it up a little bit, and started on our way. And yeah, the first upshift that it makes, which is usually from first to third gear, it doesn't usually shift from first to second gear unless you launch in a hurry. But that first to third gear this morning in 5-degree weather, yeah, that was a little rough. First 5 or 10 minutes that we were driving. After that, once the transmission temp came up,
turn left,
and you can see it's got a engine temp gauge and then a transmission temp gauge that you can set up, and then you can set your boost gauge and then your fuel gauge. You can adjust these gauges depending how you want them. The two in the middle. But again, once it was warmed up, nope, it went back to a completely normal shift. And you do notice, and I mentioned it, it goes from first, it skips second, usually shifts into third, and it stays in third gear for a while, and it just almost feels like it's a manual transmission that's letting the clutch out, which can be a little bit disconcerting, like it's slipping a clutch, because of the amount that it slips. And then it locks up, and then you accelerate through third gear, and then it either goes into fourth and fifth, or it skips fourth and goes right into fifth, and all the way up to 10th. Totally transparent. You just for the most part don't even notice, and you don't have to think about what the transmission's doing, as opposed to in the diesel, where it's not the strongest engine in the world, and on occasion, especially when you've got a trailer, you have to start locking out the upper gears. And what that looks like is you hit the buttons on the shifter, the plus minus buttons, and you just start hitting that minus button and you start locking out the upper gears. So now it's a 6-speed automatic, or it's a 7, or it's an 8. I think 7th gear is direct drive, 8th, 9th, and 10th are overdrive. And so if you need to, you can lock out the upper gears. And this thing, you never have to think about it, partly because it's got so much power, and partly because it's got a 373 rear axle ratio, which you have to get in the 4-wheel drive PowerBoost. And so you're just never short on power, even when you're towing a 5,000 plus pound trailer. And that's not the case in the diesel, which has almost 200 fewer horsepower, and which has a much, much taller final drive. So yeah, in the diesel, you have to lock out the upper gears. And that's the neat thing about this transmission. I think the 10-speed in the Super Duty has the same feature, and you do not get that feature in something like the 6-speed Allison in the Duramax. I don't know if you can get it in either the Aisin transmission or the 68 RFE that comes with your Cummins. But it's just neat to lock out upper gears without forcing yourself into manual mode, because in manual mode, yeah, then you're manually shifting every single gear, and you don't want to do that some of the time. Sometimes all you want to do is just lock out the top gear or the top couple of gears, and the Ford transmission lets you do that. Again, not an issue in the PowerBoost, definitely an issue in the diesel. And on the subject of the transmission, we'll mention one thing, and it's just been a bit of an irritation, and it does get in the way of towing heavier loads with this thing. There's no engine brake or any type of exhaust brake or anything of that nature in any powertrain with the F-150. And we know that a lot of people don't even like the one that comes in the Super Duty, the 6.7 Power Stroke. And it's just, as far as we're concerned, that's like a safety issue, because we've been on some really, really steep hills in places like San Diego, in, well, where we are now in Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. And when you're coming down a steep hill, it would be nice not to have to ride the brakes all the way down. And sadly, in this thing, and also in the light duty diesel, the engine does nothing to help slow you down. Absolutely nothing. And so sadly, you're riding your brakes all the way down a long, steep downhill grade. And that's bad enough without a trailer. But when you start getting 5 and 6 and 8,000 pounds hitched up, the limit on this thing is 12,000 pounds on the PowerBoost, the 4-wheel drive PowerBoost. You wouldn't in a million years want to tow anything close to that amount of weight in the mountains with the PowerBoost, because it's not going to help you going downhill, and you're going to melt the brakes and overheat maybe your trailer brakes and get into a really, really bad place. And it's sad, because it's the kind of thing that Ford should know better, because they've been making trucks for so many years and they sell so many. It's the best-selling vehicle of any kind in the U.S., the F-Series, and yet you cannot safely tow heavy loads in the mountains with this truck, specifically because of the fact that you get no engine braking on the downhill. We mentioned a number of times, it's just astonishing. You know, you compare that to a Duramax. Our Duramax that's more than 10 years old, the 2011 LML, has a phenomenal exhaust brake, and it will hold a 15,000 plus pound trailer. So you can safely go down a steep downhill descent without having to ride the brakes all the way down. And this thing will not hold a trailer half that weight. And so that's just a little bit frustrating. Regardless, that's about it for the transmission. Again, this is a different transmission than you get in the Super Duty, and a lot of people say the Super Duty transmission, the 10-speed in the Super Duty, which I think they call the torque shift, has had very, very high failure rates. If you watch a channel called Tow Piglet, it's a hotshot trucker who's had a number of Super Duties, 2020 and newer, when they went to a 10-speed. He's had a number of transmission failures in those trucks on that new 10-speed and the Super Duty. But again, that's a different transmission from the 10-speed and the light duty. And Ford and GM share that same transmission, both in the light duty and in the Super Duty. So whereas when you hear about a 10-speed Allison, that is not an Allison. That is a transmission designed and built both by Ford and GM that Allison sort of reviewed and decided they approved, and they put their seal of approval onto. Similar to what you see here on the audio system. It says B&O on it. A lot of these sound systems weren't necessarily designed or engineered by B&O or Bose or Sony or whatnot. They just got paid to put their seal of approval on it. Okay, so that's the engine and the trans. As regards the hybrid system, it's a really, really neat design. It's a very, very neat design. Essentially, it is a full hybrid, and it's got an electric motor, 50 horsepower electric motor that is sandwiched between the engine and the transmission. But it can operate either in conjunction with the transmission or in conjunction with the engine independently, or in conjunction with both. And unlike most other hybrids out there, it doesn't have a CVT, a continuously variable transmission effect, like in a Prius or like a lot of Toyota hybrids, which are just so annoying to drive, because you get on the gas and the engine revs and you never feel the sensation of shifting gears. and it's just no fun to drive in a typical hybrid. In this thing, the power, either with the engine or with the electric motor, is all going through that 10-speed automatic, and so it feels like you're driving a real truck, and that is a great thing, and we appreciate it, because you don't feel any of that hybrid weirdness that's just so annoying in a lot of other hybrid vehicles. Unlike 99% of hybrids, it actually has a tachometer. And these gauges are great. These are the gauges that come with the XL and the XLT. We vastly prefer them to the full digital gauge cluster that comes with the Lariat and above. And the one downside of to the hybrid system is that it's got a tiny little hybrid battery. It's got a 1.5 kilowatt hour battery, and that's about the size of the battery in a Prius. And you'd think in a 6,000 pound pickup truck, they could at least find space and room, or they could at least accommodate the size and weight of a slightly bigger hybrid battery. The battery in this thing sits under the bed towards the front of the bed. And I mean, you know, a Tesla has a 100 kilowatt hour battery. It's just a little bit annoying that they don't have a bigger one, because that limits the amount of driving you can do in pure electric mode. And it limits the overall efficiency, or the overall MPG boost that you get from the hybrid system. And a lot of people will tell you get very little. And it also means you can't use it as a plug-in hybrid, because there's no point, because the battery is so tiny. Supposedly Ford was working on a plug-in version of this thing, and then when the reservations started flooding in for the Lightning, the full electric, they canceled work on a plug-in version of the PowerBoost, which is too bad, because the Lightning is basically useless in terms of its range, even in warm weather, especially when you're towing, and especially in cold weather. You lose a huge amount of range, either with towing or in cold weather, and that makes that Lightning pickup basically useless for a lot of people who are discovering that to their astonishment. But this thing, such as it is, does a great job. The Pro Power onboard system, we haven't had a ton of occasions to use it. I know right about now, many thousands of people are using their Pro Power onboard to essentially to stay alive, because there's millions of people right now without electric power, thanks to this winter storm that just came through. And their F-150 with Pro Power on board, 120 and 240 volt AC, is, like I said, literally keeping them alive. It's got enough power to run the heat in your house. It can run the heat in a couple of houses. It'll last, I think Ford said 72 hours at full load with a full tank of gas. And that's, again, absolutely phenomenal. So much better than anything else on the market. There's nothing remotely comparable right now. Even the new Super Duty, the 2023 Super Duty, does not have a Pro Power on board system anywhere near as good as the one in the F-150, the 7.2, because the Super Duty only has 2 kilowatts, and the engine basically has to be running the entire time, since it doesn't have a hybrid battery. So great job to Ford. Only little caveat about that is that it would be nice if the system didn't trip when there was a ground fault. And some people would say, well, that's a safety issue. But a lot of people would like to be able to run their house off their PowerBoost just by cutting the master power switch to the house, and then backfeeding a 240 AC outlet with the output from this thing. And Ford does not let you do that, essentially because it keeps tripping, because it keeps getting a ground fault. But anyway, again, phenomenal system. The suspension is great, and it's about the smoothest riding pickup we've ever driven. And that's a big difference compared to the 3-liter Power Stroke, which has the FX4 package, which we don't recommend, and we've gone into it on a number of occasions because it really kills your ride quality. And unless you're doing technical off-roading in really rough terrain, or rock crawling, or driving the Baja 1000, you just don't need that level of stiffness on the part of your shock absorbers, because you don't need, the body control is not compromised by your regular shocks, such that you need stronger shocks that the FX4 package provides. and it's not even that expensive. It's like a $500 package. A lot of people swear by it. We think it's really not necessary. We spend most of our time on the highway. Even if you're on dirt roads, if you're mud bogging, you don't need those stiff shocks. You only need them if you're in like off-road in Utah or somewhere, going through really, really complex terrain, and it's really exercising the full limits of your suspension, and then you need it. But again, you're probably going to buy a Raptor or a Rattler or a Tremor if you're in a situation like that. Anyway, the one thing we'll say about the suspension that's a little bit unfortunate is that the payload is very, very low on the PowerBoost. On this one, it's only about 1,450 pounds, 1,480. And we have maxed it out on occasion, and it does severely limit your gooseneck towing that you can do. And we do a lot of gooseneck towing with our Duramax, and we would like to be doing it with this one, but we're not going to be able to. We got the gooseneck in our other F-150 because it has a few hundred pounds more payload, so we'll be able to do a little bit there. A gooseneck being a much, much more stable type of trailer. If you could get the heavy-duty payload package with the PowerBoost, that would be a tremendous, tremendous truck. Because again, this powertrain and the Pro Power on board is perfectly suited to people who tow their camper and spend a lot of miles boondocking and that kind of thing. But again, because it does not have the heavy-duty payload package, which adds close to 1,000 pounds, between 500 and 1,000 pounds of extra payload, you're limited in what you can do. Okay, the steering is absolutely phenomenal, and we've said that in a number of areas about this truck. But the steering is yet another one. It's great. It's precise. It gives you good feedback. Has really good on-center feel. And we just wish the Super Duty steered as well as the F-150, because the Super Duty with the straight axle does not have rack and pinion steering. It feels terrible. You get no feedback from it whatsoever. Theoretically, that won't be an issue now that lane centering is available in the Super Duty as of the start of 2023. So you're not going to be spending, hours and hours on the highway trying to keep it between the lane dividers, because the computer is going to do that for you. And so we'll see how that plays out. We've got a Super Duty on order. We'll see if it works as advertised. But the lane center in this truck works absolutely phenomenal. All right, the body itself, we have had absolutely no issues with it. It's great looking. It's aluminum, so you know it's never going to rust. It's just a real handsome looking truck. We thought we'd get a lot more dings and dents because it's very, very thin. And aluminum is very soft, and aluminum stretches and gets it's a lot easier to dent than steel. But that hasn't been the case. Because we've had one mishap in the 3-liter Power Stroke, or I should say a colleague of ours did, and it got one small ding in one of the doors from somebody else opening their door into it. It would have been nice if Ford had put like a bump strip, the way a lot of cars have, like the VW there. Like a little rubber bump strip, something like that. But I guess they decided the styling would have been compromised or something like that. And so you are going to start collecting little dents and dings in the body. You see the Lexus there, it has the little bump strip. I mean, every car used to have it, and then for some reason somebody decided they didn't like the way that looked, and now you can't hardly get it in a car or a truck, and it's frustrating because this thing, it's a $60,000 pickup truck, and because of the way people are these days, they're going to start opening their door into you, or the wind's going to catch it or something, and you're going to start collecting a series of dents in your truck. And people will say, well, it's a truck, who cares? Sure, fine. It would be nice if you didn't have to live with that, though. again, we're very, very happy with the refresh that Ford did in 2021. The body looks just great. The interior, same thing. It's an absolutely phenomenal interior. Great ergonomics. Everything about it is just about perfect. There are a couple of small issues we've had. One of which is with the trailer brake controller. It actually had to be replaced because there was some type of fault with it, and the dealer couldn't exactly figure out what it was, and they ended up having to replace it. It's under warranty, no big deal. The mirrors, we've talked about that. Somebody hit this mirror on the left side and cracked it. It's a towing mirror. It sticks out more than a foot. And because we got the XLT, not the Lariat, the mirrors don't fold automatically. And so they're just hanging out there. And so if you want to manually fold them every single time you park in a parking lot, that might be what you want to do. Or you can just get the Lariat. And they've got automatic folding and automatic telescoping towing mirrors. Other than that, we love those mirrors, although we do have to put the bubble on there because it's a long story. We've already explained it. Other issues with the interior, really nothing to speak of. It just works, all of it. We've talked about the fact that if in a perfect world we would be able to get the bench seat so that you could sit a third person up front if you load up the back seat with cargo or packages or what have you. But the problem again with the bench seat in the F-150 and the Super Duty is that it's got a tiny little console. Not even a quarter as big as the console that you get when you get the fixed center console, and it's got tiny little cup holders compared to these ones, which are nice and big, and they'll hold your big gulp, they'll hold whatever you want to put into them. It's just a lot more useful of a layout from that perspective. But again, it's unfortunate that you can't get the bench seat and get a useful console and useful cup holders with it. Not that you should make decisions in life based on cup holders. This shifter, the console shifter, is basically worthless. It doesn't even shift that well. It feels really junky and cheap and flimsy. Our other F-150 comes with the column shifter, and that's really the one you want. Other than that, you see how much junk builds up here in the center console area, and that's fine. We've had a couple of pickup trucks with bench seats though, and again, it's nice being able to fit a third passenger up front. If as happens with us a lot, if you fill up the back seat with cargo or packages or suitcases or something. Climate controls, very well laid out. Big dials. I know they've taken the display out of the dials in as of 22 because I think they were short on chips or something. It's dual zone. Everything just works, and it's very easy to adjust the temperature. You don't have to mess with the screen, although you can adjust it on the screen. You can also use the dial, the radio. It's got an actual dial to control the volume, which is a rarity these days. You can push a button to turn the power on. You can turn a dial to tune it. All that stuff is really nice. And Ford learned their lesson because the early versions of Sync, we drove a 2012 Explorer and it didn't have manual controls, and so you had to mess around with the screen, and on the highway at 70 miles an hour, it's just not what you want to be doing. So again, great job to Ford with the control layout for the HVAC and for the audio. You see the knobs are different sizes, so it's very easy to grab the right control without even looking. This is the Pro Trailer Backup Assist, which we have not had occasion to use yet. This is the drive mode select knob, and we've talked about it. It's really not that intuitive, and for most people it's going to just be confusing. They're going to think you push to change the drive mode, and that's not actually what you do. You push to when you push the button, that actually locks the differential, the rear differential. It's got push button, shift on the fly, 4-wheel drive. And that's fine, but we really wish they would have had an automatic 4-wheel drive system in the XLT and not forced you to get the Lariat to get automatic 4-wheel drive. for reasons we've gone into in the past. Mostly because of the fact that you might give your truck to somebody who doesn't know that you can't leave it in four-wheel drive on dry pavement. You know, they'll be stuck in the mud, or they'll be trying to get through some deep snow. They'll put it in four-wheel drive, and then they'll forget about it, and then they'll get back on dry pavement and ruin your differential or your transfer case or your transmission or something. Bust one of your CV joints because they didn't know you were supposed to turn off four-wheel drive once you get back on dry pavement. And that's unfortunate. It would have been nice if Ford would have included automatic four-wheel drive. Trailer brake controller, nothing to say about it. It just works, and it's nice and high. It's not, you know, not that kind of thing where they put it way down low and you can't even find it. The controls over here, not much to say. You got your window switches, your mirrors, your locks. Everything just works. You know, the switches for your lights, those are way down to the point where it's kind of hard to figure them out. But fortunately, you just set the lights on automatic and then forget all about it. You've got a fuel release there, and that is because of the fact that the fuel system is pressurized most of the time, and so you can't just open the door and put fuel in the way you can in a normal Ford pickup. You have to actually hit the release, which gives it time to, I think, depressurize the fuel system. Again, I mean, it's just a very good looking interior. It's not, you might say it's not quite as artistic or as, you know, handsome as the Dodge, the especially the heavy duty Ram, which is a very nice looking interior. But it's practical, it's useful. It is, again, a very handsome layout. It's intuitive, and again, there's really no complaints, practically at all, to be had. We've got the panoramic sunroof. It's like $1,000+ of an option, and to be honest, 99% of people don't need it. And you're just adding weight to the vehicle, which reduces your payload. And you know the deal with a sunroof. Eventually, after 5 or 6 years, you start plugging up the drains start to get plugged up, and then it starts to leak into the interior, or maybe the motor dies, and you know, you start having sunroof emergencies. It's got the rear power sliding glass in the back window there, and it's not an essential feature, but it's nice to be able to crack it open and just get a little bit of ventilation and hear what's going on around you. Adds a little bit to your awareness. The Sport package has a little bit nicer in terms of the color on the interior. Our other F-150 does not have the Sport package, and it just looks a little bit cheaper. But then again, the Sport package also has like a blacked out grille, blacked out wheels, and it's basically a chrome delete, and it looks a little bit cheaper on the exterior as far as we're concerned. Plus, it forces you to have this ridiculous console shifter. So we would choose the chrome package, and we would definitely not get the Sport package if we were optioning a truck. Okay, one or two other things about the interior. The XLT does not normally come with leather seats. This truck had leather seats put into it by the dealer. And yes, I know there's a lot of debris around here. And they're fine. They're made by a company called Catskin. There's this other feature in the back seat, which every single pickup should come with. It's called under-seat locking storage. And so it's basically a pop-up storage compartment. And you lock it into position. And then when you put the seat down, and you put both parts of the 60/40 seat, you can lock the seat into position with the ignition key, and then you can store your rifles or shotguns or whatever else you need to store under there, and nobody will even know that they are there, let alone be able to get at them easily. And when you're not using them, it's basically a completely flat load floor. I mean, it ramps up a tiny bit, maybe a half inch or so, but there's no transmission hump. There's nothing in the way. you know, as compared to in the Ram, where your little storage compartment is permanently in place, and it cuts down on the utility of that load floor. And so the Ford design is much more useful, easy to live with. And that really sums up the truck in so many ways. It has so much innovation in it, so many thoughtful details, so many things that you could tell Ford was just kind of sweating bullets to get exactly precisely right, because they know how their customers live, and they know what their customers need to do with these trucks. At 50,000 miles, we have practically nothing to complain about. We talked about the trailer brake controller, and we've talked once or twice before about the excessive wear on the outer edge of the front tires, and we ended up getting that fixed. We tried a number of times, and the second time we brought it in, somebody at the dealer was able to figure it out. It was an alignment issue, and since that time we have not had substantial extra wear on the front tires. The original set of their 20-inch hand cooks, they lasted the full 50,000 miles, which is actually very impressive to us, especially after all the wear that they had on the outer edges. But they made it the full 50,000 miles, and we're about to change them out for a set of Michelins. And to be honest, we're torn as to whether or not to get rid of this truck. The plan was to trade it in when our new Super Duty arrives, which could be anywhere from 90 days to 3 months to 6 months from now. But it's such a great truck in so many ways, and it has this Pro Power onboard system, which, like I said, for many thousands of people who are using it at this exact moment to stay alive because their power is out, it's almost something you can't live without once you get used to it. So again, great job on the part of Ford with practically everything related to the design and execution of the 2021 F-150 and the PowerBoost hybrid system and the Pro Power onboard AC power system. Great job. Couldn't be happier with this truck. Thanks. I think that's all for now. We'll talk to you later.